Hey friends, this month I've been talking all things kids and sugar, and this week I'm actually going to be focusing on sugar obsession in kids and what that looks like, and some of the main reasons that might be triggering obsession around sugar in your own children. So, first, I just want to start by clearing up the difference between excitement around sugar and then obsession. Like what does that mean? Okay? Cuz the truth of the matter is that sweets and desserts are often very exciting for kids, right? I know my kids, they love sweets and treats, and I'm just using those words for the sake of this video, but we get them frequently in our home all the time, and they still do really get excited about them, and that's okay. And you might see that in your own children and wonder, is this okay? Is this, borderline obsession? And I want to explain the difference to you to kind of help you decipher where some red flags might be. So sugar obsession in kids is very much a preoccupation with desserts or sweets or whatever it might be. And we might see this kind of manifest in a couple different ways. So, for example, a child who might have a unhealthy preoccupation with sweets might go out of their way to find sweets however they can get them. So we might see a child sneaking sweets or hoarding them or eating them in secret, eating them in their room. You might find wrappers in different places of the house. That can be some red flags to look out for. Another sign that can go along with sugar obsession in kids can include a child who can't seem to get their mind off of sweets or whatever it might be. So what we tend to see here is kids who are talking a lot about it and asking a lot about it. Like, when are we going to have dessert? Or are we going to have this soon? And they're just constantly asking and asking about it. So that can also show just a little bit of preoccupation with it. And, we want to pay attention to stuff like that. And I am actually going to talk a little bit today about some ways that you can help normalize sugar in your home. So if this is something that you're working on, I do have some tips and strategies for you. Another thing is if a child, always is going for the dessert first. So if dessert is being offered, they're showing more interest in that versus other foods, or they may not show interest in other foods if sweets are there as well. And, another thing too is just their emotional behavior around it. So kids who have an unhealthy preoccupation or obsession with sweets may have a lot of strong emotions about sweets being available or not being available. So for example, if they get, cookies with lunch and they eat all their cookies and they're asking for more, but none are available, it could trigger tantrums or meltdowns or just a lot of really big feelings about these sweets and desserts. So again, that's just some brief overview. There's definitely a lot of nuances there, but I just wanted to kind of share an overview about the difference between an unhealthy obsession with sweets and then just general excitement, right? Like, kids who have an emotional equivalence with all foods or feel like all foods are emotionally equal for them will show interest in a variety of different foods, not just sweets. So, for example, your child might get really excited about berries and really excited about cookies, or, even with my own kids, I see this. Like, my youngest is obsessed, not obsessed, but she really, really loves roasted broccoli with cheese, and we have that a lot. And whenever she sees it, she gets super excited. And she also shows that same excitement for things like ice cream and candy, but she can leave some of those foods behind when she's eating them. And that shows me that she's really in tune with her internal regulators when it comes to desserts and sweets. So those are some things that we would want to be looking for, like, does our child show interest in other foods? Are they, open to eating other things, or are they solely preoccupied with the sweet portion of their meal? And there are some reasons that can contribute to sugar obsession. And if you're dealing with this with your own kids, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And I understand how intense this can feel as a parent or a caregiver. And there's absolutely hope for you and your kids, no matter what your experiences have been like. And I just want to share, again, some of the main reasons that I see that kids do develop an unhealthy obsession or preoccupation with sweets. I'm going to share a couple today, and then I'm going to share another one later this week. So be sure to stay tuned for more. But again, there's a few, but some of the biggest reasons that I see kids developing an unhealthy obsession with sweets. Number one is lack of frequency. So what I mean by frequency is how often a child gets access or exposure to desserts and sweets. And this can be a really tough one because, again, diet culture has put out these messages that sugar is toxic and addictive and harmful for our kids, and we should prevent our children from having it at all costs. And if you didn't get a chance to watch, I did do a video on sugar addiction a few posts back. So be sure to check that one out if you're interested in more ideas about that concept. But as parents, when we hear these messages, our inclination is to restrict them or keep them out of our house or limit the exposure that our kids have to these foods. Now, here's the thing. We think as parents sometimes that we can control the environment our kids are living in. And to a degree, we can, right? Like when they're in the context of our own home, we can regulate what's coming in, what foods they're exposed to, what media they're watching to a degree. But the thing is, we live in a world where desserts and sugar and sweets galore exist in every form. And while we can control what our kids might be exposed to in our home, once they leave our home, we're opening them up to an environment that they've never been exposed to or never had practice to, So, again, while we can control and limit the exposure of sweets that our kids have in our own home, this is where I see a lot of kids where they don't get a lot of exposure to sweets in their home, but if they go out to birthday parties or special events where sweets are available, they might go crazy because they're like, whoa, this is a whole new world that I've been limited from. And so what I tend to see is a frequency here where kids don't have frequent exposure to sweets. It actually makes them more obsessive about them whenever they do get exposure or access to them. So this is what I call the feast or famine type of mentality around sweets and desserts. So when a child knows that they're scarce, it really does feel like a forbidden fruit, right? Like it makes it seem so much more special because they're not getting enough access to it in their own home. And what happens is when a child is exposed to it, it can really shift how they're eating, where it feels so scarce. They're going to eat regardless of what their internal cues are telling them. So if they never get cookies and all of a sudden cookies are available, they're more likely to overeat them because they've never had exposure or the opportunities to learn how to self-regulate them. So frequency is a big one. And sometimes, and this is a theme I'm going to come back to, sometimes as parents, we do limit the frequency that our kids do have exposure to sweets because of our own discomfort around them or because our own fears or concerns about them. So, it's important to get curious about that. If your child isn't getting frequent exposure to sweets in your home right now, why is that? And just getting curious and asking yourself what might be some of the underlying reasons regarding that. And I am going to do a separate video all about frequency. So how frequently to offer, what signs to look for, and all of that. So that will be coming down the road too. The second big one that I see here is consistency. And consistency means just how regularly you're offering, and are there any stipulations attached to the sweets themselves? So for example, if a child knows like I have to eat my dinner before I get dessert, or I have to take so many bites of my veggies before I can eat, my cookies or my sweets or whatever, that is creating an uneven balance in their mind when it comes to food and dessert. So it's starting to create a hierarchy of food. And again, it pushes them to eat for external reasons versus their own internal cues. And this is where I see too that sweets just goes up on a pedestal for kids because it's putting it above other foods. When we're saying you can have this after you eat this, it makes desserts and sweets so much more special. And sometimes this can trigger, preoccupation with them in a child's mind where kids are, don't want to sit there and eat dinner. They just want to get to dessert. And of course, that's going to trigger some preoccupation and obsession with it. Another thing with consistency is how it's approached with the caregivers in the home. So sometimes one caregiver might, have a more legalized approach to sugar and saying, yeah, we can have this with meals and, allowing different kinds of sweets and desserts, where another caregiver might say, no, like we can only have this at certain times, or we need to eat this before we can have dessert. So if there's any discrepancy between the caregivers, that inconsistency can send some confusing and mixed messages to a child. So those two big things, frequency and consistency. And really quickly, I'm just going to give you some strategies to help you if you're hoping to normalize sweets for your child. And the first one is to offer it more frequently, right? We want to increase consistency to not make it such a forbidden fruit. And again, I'm going to get into the nuances of how to know how frequently to offer it. But if you're noticing that your child is showing a preoccupation with any type of sweet or dessert, that is definitely an indicator that they need to see it more frequently. And again, seeing it more frequently doesn't mean just saying, okay, here's the whole bag of cookies, like go to town. Seeing it more frequently means you're intentionally offering it more often with their regular meals and snacks. Again, we want to pair their sweets with the foods that they already are eating in order to create some emotional equality with all foods in their mind. And when a child sees all foods emotionally equal, they're better able to self-regulate and eat according to what their body needs, not based on feelings of scarcity or, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to eat this, I better eat it all now. Okay. So again, offering it more frequently, maybe that means including it with lunch and dinner, or offering it with snack and dinner. I've even offered candy with my kids with breakfast. So really switching it up. And another part of this is to offer before your child's asking. So often our kids are the ones to have to ask us, can I have this sweet? Can we have, candy? Can we have this? And it sometimes can be frustrating and really drive us crazy as parents, right? So what we want to do instead is, again, beat our child to the punch and ask them before they're asking us. So already making the decision in your mind that I'm going to offer my kids candy with their lunch. And you might say, hey kids, you want to come pick out, a few pieces of candy from the candy jar to have with lunch. So you're taking the initiative and you're moving into a proactive role versus your kids always having to be the ones to ask you. If they're always asking you, that can be a sign of anxiousness and just fear of not getting enough dessert in a child's mind. Okay. Let's see, what else do I have on my notes? Okay, a couple more things. So one is when you're offering, or a second point here is when you're offering to not micromanage. So you want to offer, right? Parents provide, child decides. So you're offering the meal with the dessert and you're allowing your child to self-regulate and decide what they want to eat from the food that you've offered and how much they want to eat. Okay. The other thing here is to, lead with a yes. And what I mean by this is, again, our kids often have to be asking multiple times to feel assured that dessert is coming or sweets are going to be part of their future. And when I say lead with a yes, I mean we want to help reassure our child that those foods are part of their future indefinitely. They don't have to earn them. There's no stipulations around them. They can have sweets. Now, it doesn't mean you're saying yes every single moment or always giving in to every request that your child is asking for, but you're letting them know that yes, it's coming. So one thing I like to tell my kids is, yes, we can have whatever it is, fill in the blank cookies, we can have candy, whatever they're asking for. Yes, so we're going to have that with snack today, or we're going to have some cookies with milk for our snack after we go to the library, whatever it is. So giving your children some reassurance versus them always hearing no, like, no, we're not going to have that. No, you've already had too much. Like that can make a child even more obsessive and preoccupied with sweets. Okay. And then last little point here is modeling. So when our kids can see us enjoying sweets alongside them, that is huge in their mind, right? It helps normalize it for them. It helps them understand, like, these are foods that are okay. They're safe. I'm safe to eat them too, and they're going to be part of my future. but also modeling in our approach and our language around sweets. So, how are we talking about it? Are we giving our kids any verbal or nonverbal cues around sweets that could potentially make them feel bad about it? So we just want to get curious about our own mindset and behavior and attitudes towards sweets and approach it in a way that can help our children feel safe and to normalize these foods for them. So I hope this was helpful. I know this was a lot, but stay tuned for another video coming where I'm going to talk about a third reason why kids can feel obsessive around sweets. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks, guys.